Atlanta is at a crossroads. For the past 20 years, we have been building the epic undertaking we all know as the Atlanta Beltline, a vision for 33 miles of paved trail and 22 miles of light rail transportation, aligned directly with dense market housing, affordable housing, and mixed use. However, while the Beltline has been marketed as this project bringing both rail transit and last mile connections via the trail, the public hasn't seen a morsel of transit along the entirety of the Beltline. Really, most people see it as a vehicle for gentrification and displacement. Luckily, this is all about to change next year when MARTA is about to expand the Atlanta Streetcar to create the first Beltline rail route, connecting downtown to destinations along the Beltline such as Krog Street, Inman Park, and Pond City Market. It's the single most successful public transit line MARTA could build right now. Unfortunately, there's a battle we're seeing in the public eye between the public vision of the Beltline as a transit-oriented project and the vision of a few select powerful NIMBYs and a lobbyist who fear change to their beloved trail. And now they have the ear of the mayor, Andre Dickens. He's pushed an alternative, hypocritical plan that will ultimately kick the transit bucket down the road for another decade. And in this video, I hope to do something they won't tell you. Double down on the Eastside extension and convince y'all that it's time to make some noise about this. All right, let's dive in. The year is 1999. We're reeling off the high of the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. Outkast, Ludacris, and Jermaine Dupri are blasting in your stereo, and you have the first Atlanta Thrashers game this weekend. But quietly, one of the most infamous projects in Atlanta today was being formulated. Around this time, rail-to-trail projects were becoming popular in urban design discussion, especially in urban contexts. The New York City High Line is the most infamous version of this, alongside concepts such as the Charlotte Rail Trail, Miami Underline, and others. Atlanta's version, the Atlanta Beltline, was one of the first and most ambitious proposals, though. Described in Georgia Tech PhD student Ryan Gravel's graduate thesis, he envisioned an urban development project circulating Atlanta. The idea? Connect over 40 in-town Atlanta neighborhoods with walking, biking, and light rail public transportation infrastructure. What made the Beltline different in origins from similar projects like the New York City High Line was its focus on transportation via a light rail line and dense urban infill with both affordable and market housing, rather than being a private park and investment vehicle. Since Mayor Shirley Franklin's creation of Atlanta Beltline Inc. in 2005, they have nearly completed the highly sought-after U-shaped Emerald Necklace and have completed most property acquisition and made preliminary studies for rail transit. According to Beltline leadership, the 17.9-mile continuous trail from the west side to the east side will be done by next year. Now, the only thing that was not funded was the actual transit. So in 2016, Atlanta voters passed MARTA, a bill that included funding for the first portion of Beltline Rail using a half-penny sales tax, an extension of the downtown loop to the Eastside Beltline, up to Pond City Market, alongside many other transit projects. The reason this route was chosen is because it's the densest and most viable corridor in the entire city for new rail transit. The key to effective rail transit is aligning dense housing and employment with public transit lines. And in a city like Atlanta, one of the lowest density cities in the United States, the Atlanta Beltline provides a unique opportunity to double down. So over the past several decades, the city of Atlanta, for better or worse, has been incentivizing intense development along the Eastside Beltline corridor with the goal of connecting it with light rail. They've done this oftentimes by offering intense tax breaks to development, delaying property taxes to incentivize more development. It's brought millions of dollars in private investment and has transformed the corridor into one of the best corridors for linear transportation. Specifically, along the Eastside Beltline, the population densities are now over 10,000 people per square mile, making it the sole most obvious corridor for light rail, especially considering the right-of-way has already been set aside next to the trail for light rail. However, there is actually a lot more context to rail on the Beltline than just the Beltline. To understand, we have to zoom out. The Eastside Extension project actually is a step in achieving a larger, long-term streetcar plan for the entire city of Atlanta. A plan that crisscrosses the city with different rapid routes. The most ambitious plans detail numerous routes, including the Beltline Rail Loop. The first effort for this was the Atlanta Streetcar Downtown Loop, project that created the 2.2-mile streetcar we see in downtown today back in 2008. While many criticize the problems with the downtown streetcar, such as the mixed traffic alignment, letting it get stuck in traffic, its low ridership, and a route that doesn't go anywhere, we have to realize that this was meant as a first step to the system. That's why the designers of the downtown loop specifically chose Siemens S70 hybrid light rail vehicles for use in separated Beltline rail segments. Additionally, the downtown loop also built the maintenance facility and infrastructure for light rail in Atlanta, underneath the connector in Sweet Auburn. These are just two reasons why the Eastside extension was chosen as the next expansion. Pond City Market and the Eastside Beltline are massive trip generators, and there's really no other destination in the city that could be as successful for light rail. I'll reiterate, the the Eastside Beltline is the single best corridor for fixed guideway rail transit in the entire city.
Walter Brown with Better Atlanta Transit is among those opposed to this extension.
With rail, they suddenly have fences, they suddenly have control crossing points. It's not safe anymore for people to wander across. We lose resources. Look at this wonderful vintage clothing festival happening right now in front of Lady Bird. That goes away.
Unfortunately, the biggest problem with building the path and development before the transit is that now it's potentially disruptive to build along the trail. That's one of the arguments of Better Atlanta Transit, an organization formed to specifically fight the Eastside extension, formed of business owners, a website owned by Portman Holdings, and an oil gas lobbyist. Last year, they started an artificial grassroots campaign, also known as an astroturfing campaign, to try and create distrust in the Beltline project. You've probably seen these signs along the Beltline that read, "Save the Beltline," with taglines against the streetcar. When you look into their platform, some of their talking points include that the project is expensive and disruptive, that the Beltline is a public park and not a transportation corridor. They claim light rail is an outdated technology when we have self-driving pods and e-scooters, and that is a huge safety concern. And that there are better projects for transit-dependent riders, such as infill stations or BRT projects. Ultimately, the talking points from Better Atlanta Transit can easily be debunked. For one, the Eastside extension is a fantastic value as it has the highest ridership potential out of any corridor in Atlanta. The Eastside Beltline is clearly a transportation corridor considering there is no seating space along the Beltline, and people are always traversing the Beltline between various trip generators. Light rail is a serious technology used in cities around the globe, and statistically is extremely safe as a mode of transport. Additionally, cited alternatives like building a second lane for micromobility and self-driving pods would cause a similar amount of disruption as rail construction. And lastly, scapegoating other transit projects is a bad way of saying that the public transport should continue to be segregated between lower and higher income populations.
Now you might say, there could be some plausible deniability, and this organization is simply just some concerned locals. However, after being tipped to some pretty interesting public donation records, there's something deeper going on here. For example, a major donor to Better Atlanta Transit is a group known as the 1859 Fund. This document references Jack Murphy of Carter Real Estate Holdings. Carter is a large holder of Atlanta properties, including Atlantic Station, Summerhill, the Met, and numerous other mixed-use projects. And looking at the original filing for the 1859 Fund, we can see that it was created by Jason Bowles. He is behind Tabularius Group, a prominent dark money right-wing political donation engine that successfully propelled campaigns such as Marjorie Taylor Greene. I bring this up to point out that Better Atlanta Transit isn't just some local concerned residents. It's just a small tendril of a vast network of corporate interests and even right-wing dark money PACs. Silly, right? Well, let's look at another city, Nashville, Tennessee, which went through a similar battle with similar dark money donors. In 2018, Nashville was trying to pass a public transport referendum that would fund light rail, BRT, and bus improvements, a transformative proposal for Nashville citywide. In doing so, several anti-transit groups cropped up with similar goals to Better Atlanta Transit, such as an infamous Koch brothers climate denial project Americans for Prosperity, No Tax for Tracks, and Better Transit for Nashville. Sound familiar? No Tax for Tracks specifically raised $950,000, most of which from private donors, and Americans for Prosperity is funded by the Koch brothers, two oil billionaires fueling fights against transit across the country. And guess what? The vote did not pass. As you can see, it's common for these groups to use tactics that try to establish credibility for being pro-transit, but in reality, the goals are simply to kill a project with no follow-through. The goal is always to simply make the public confused or distrustful enough to not support the project. It's worked so intensely, in fact, that now the formerly pro-Eastside Rail Mayor, Andre Dickens, has come forward with a new plan for Atlanta that bows to the wills of these NIMBYs and parrots the exact same talking points.
Yeah, so we are still looking at how to make sure that we can fully vet this process of getting transportation around the Beltline as well. So we have to think, is it going to be rail? Is it going to be autonomous vehicles like pods? There will be some places where there's light rail, and there'll be some places where there's other types of transit in the short term. Certain parts of it are already extremely dense with a lot of activity, a lot of walking, but then there are some areas that are open for, quickly deliver, and these are actually aligned with the areas that have more rider dependency. We think that the Southside Trail, with Murphy Crossing being an infill station for MARTA.
Money pumped into the Eastside effort, and now is that gone to waste?
No, nothing has gone to waste. There's a prioritization. Right now, we want to make sure that light rail comes to the Beltline and that it comes to the Southside first.
Dickens also wants MARTA to support his goal of building 4 new MARTA infill stations, including at Krog Street Market and Armour Yards in Northwest Atlanta.
Basically, the plan he presents is the same as more MARTA 2016, just with a few twists. For one, Beltline Rail was to be split into 2 phases. One being the Eastside extension ending at the Beltline instead of on the Beltline, and then a second phase that will construct over 4 miles of separated Beltline rail on the south side, the whole new maintenance facility, and also extend the Eastside extension project upon City Market.
The point I want to make is, it's exactly the same talking points as Better Atlanta Transit presents, just with a fresh coat of paint.
For one, the mayor cites that we should look at infill stations and other projects such as North Ave BRT through an executive order. Additionally, the mayor cites transit to the Beltline instead of on the Beltline, but then pushes for Southside rail on the Beltline. And even worse, he seems to support the notion of alternatives to rail such as self-driving pods and separated lanes in the interim on the Eastside Trail.
Rail, is it going to be autonomous vehicles like pods?
What's worse, the collusion is so obvious that the most recent version of the Better Atlanta Transit Platform document is a brand new paragraph celebrating the mayor's decisions. The reality is, the mayor is using the guise of equity as a distraction to bend to the wills of the developers and business owners in the Eastside Beltline. There's actually going to be zero follow-through on this plan, especially considering that this announcement is days after announcing his re-election campaign, which he is currently running unopposed so far.
Now, would Southside Rail be great? Or infill stations? Of course. However, what the public is upset about is losing the obvious slam dunk project that is the Eastside extension.
That's the problem here. If MARTA is convinced to step back on the Eastside extension, all other proposed projects will have to be restudied intensely, along with infill stations, the Southside Rail, and more, pushing back any progress for at least 10 years. Just ask the experts. Former VP of Planning at Beltline Inc. posted in the AJC this statement. Halting this progress now would waste millions of dollars and set back the project significantly. Redirecting focus to a different corridor would require another decade of study and design before construction could begin, essentially delaying any transit construction on the Beltline by 10 plus years. If we're being real, the density along the Southside Trail is just not there, and the Murphy Crossing project that this would anchor around would not bring in nearly as many riders as what we would see on the Eastside Beltline. MARTA studied the infill stations already and found that they were not worth the cost in 2016. And it would take decades to reach the current state that the Eastside Trail is in on the south side.
Again, the proposed projects by the mayor do not have any planning or funding mechanism in place. I've got to reiterate, the Eastside extension is already studied, already funded, and shovel-ready for next year. Seriously, it's so easy to just build this now. All in all, it's a classic Atlanta way bait and switch, right in front of the public. Ultimately, there are two futures for the Atlanta Beltline. One that continues as an investment project, just like the New York City High Line, and another that actually completes the goal of a transportation corridor. We can see a fantastic case study of this only 300 miles away from Atlanta, in the Charlotte Rail Trail.
Charlotte, North Carolina has been consistently building light rail since 1998, where they approved a half-penny sales tax to fund light rail transit over several decades, just like MARTA. But more critically, they built Charlotte's Lynx Blue Line that follows along Charlotte's version of the Beltline, the Rail Trail. It's an extremely successful alignment heading south from downtown, featuring housing, mixed use, a path, and a light rail line. Sound familiar?
If we go back in time to when the Blue Line was opening, we see similar discourse that we're seeing here in Atlanta. Political leaders and anti-transit campaigns warned that the Blue Line would be a white elephant, and that the project's cost of $465 million in 2007 dollars was a terrible investment. That's almost twice as much as the Atlanta Eastside extension, but they built it anyway.
However, they were dead wrong. The Blue Line along the rail trail saw almost double ridership expectations, seeing almost 50% more than the projected 9,000 weekday riders. And when they opened the $1.1 billion extension to the Blue Line in 2018, ridership exploded even more so, seeing over 27,000 weekday riders. Today, rail transit along the rail trail is one of Charlotte's biggest success stories, in the middle of the sprawl capital of the country, leading to $2.8 billion in economic development along its 3.5-mile corridor. To close out here, in my opinion, we should continue with the Eastside extension and trust the planning experts at Atlanta Beltline Inc. and MARTA. Doubling down, the Eastside extension only cost $230 million, a seriously relative bargain for the density of people within its path and the area's popularity, especially compared to other transportation projects. The mayor's 4 MARTA infill stations are estimated at $801 million. Clifton Corridor's BRT option is estimated at $1.3 billion, or even GDOT's $9.5 billion express lane project for I-285 that will only reduce traffic by 8%. This $230 million is already funded, already designed, for $20 million of that cost, and shovel-ready for next year. We are in the middle of a long-term plan to bring rail to in-town Atlanta, and we should not sabotage this goal. Not Atlanta Beltline spending $3 million on vaporware, low-capacity, self-driving pod pilot programs for the World Cup.
So let's get the proof of concept built, the most prime for success transit route in the entirety of Atlanta, the Eastside extension, and prove that Atlanta can be a world-class city. Now, we need to make sure that the mayor, Beltline Inc., and MARTA, and your city council member know how important this is to the public. Another good way to get involved is with Beltline Rail Now. We're the only organization in Atlanta taking the Beltline transit seriously in the city.
The fact of the matter is, Atlanta will continue to be an unserious city as long as we continue to be unserious about our transportation. The way to success is more urban infill, more density and mixed uses, and more public transportation to efficiently connect the dense parts of our city with reliable transportation. Until then, Atlanta will be as unserious as ever and never achieve that dream of being a global city it set out to be in 1996.
Thank you for watching. If you like this video and want to support me, consider supporting me on Patreon or YouTube memberships. Joining gives you full access to full interviews, weekly updates on my projects, and more, and overall just seriously helps out the channel. I couldn't do it without y'all. And of course, subscribing is also much appreciated. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.